Welcome to the Earth Day Everyday webinar series for spring 2025. Have we started recording?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Welcome everyone, and this is our first installment of our spring 2025 webinar series. Some good news, environmental success stories in New Jersey. I am Jean Epiphan. I am a county agent in Morris County. My background is in forestry and ecology, and I'm joined here by many of my associates in the Earth Day Everyday Series group. Amy Rowe, Michelle Bacchus, Sal Mangifico, Steve Urgeau, and Doug Zemeckis. We're so happy to have you all here today joining us. For those of you that are just entering the waiting room, welcome. And we will get started with a couple of little items. So one big item is the consent to participate in the research study. We're going to have a poll at the end because we are testing knowledge gain, and it's part of a research study and how we perform our educational outreach. And so in the beginning of this poll, that will be towards the end, you can consent to be part of this study. You can also deny, it's up to you, but just know it's anonymous. If you have questions, you can contact Amy Rowe at the bottom of the screen. And Rutgers is an equal opportunity provider, and we promote justice for all. Now, I am going to, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we're going to have our first speaker, Ben Pisano, share his screen while I give his introduction. So, Ben Pisano is he is currently working for the New Jersey Forest Service. He's been working since 2019 in forest health and the state lands program. He has his Bachelor's of Science in Biology from James Madison University and a Master's of Science in Ecology from Rutgers University. And he's going to talk to us about biocontrol for hemlock woolly adelgid and the success that we've had in the state of New Jersey. So take it away, Ben, and just wait 1 minute. I have one note is that we have 2 speakers today, so hang tight, and we are going to talk about the taking care of our areas that are prone to fire and things that our Forest Service is doing to help save us from wildfires. So, all right, here we go. Let's start with you, Ben. Take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Jean, for the introduction. So as Jean said, my name is Ben Pisano. I'm a GIS specialist with the New Jersey Forest Service. I'm also joined by my colleague, Dylan Wiget. He's going to be kind of giving a second presentation, kind of like 2 segments after mine, talking about the Pinelands region and wildfire in the Pinelands and a project there to mitigate wildfire. So I'm going to start out talking about biocontrols in New Jersey forests, specifically related to hemlock and its pest, hemlock woolly adelgid. So I'm going to start with some history of hemlock woolly adelgid. So the scientific name is Adelgid tsugae. It's native to East Asia. It was first discovered in the eastern U.S. in 1951 in proximity to Richmond, Virginia. It was first detected in New Jersey down in Burlington County in 1978. So almost 30 years after its initial U.S. introduction, it was found in New Jersey. And it's currently found throughout the entire state of New Jersey, wherever you can find hemlock, which is kind of like the majority of New Jersey, mainly central and northern New Jersey. So on the right, we have a picture of a hemlock that is heavily infested by hemlock woolly adelgid. And these white little kind of fluffy cottony spots are hemlock woolly adelgid, which I'll go into that a little bit more shortly. So the biology of hemlock woolly adelgid, it's a sap feeder. It feeds on the sap of younger branches. So normally it's concentrated on the ends of the branches, as you saw in that previous picture. So in the Northeast where we are, all of the hemlock woolly adelgid are females that reproduce parthenogenically. So they reproduce asexually. They don't need a male to reproduce. And they normally have 3 generations throughout the year. So one generation is winged, and this winged generation does not survive in our region, and that's because its typical spruce host is not present. There's also hemlock woolly adelgid in the Pacific Northwest, as well as in Asia, as I mentioned. So the other 2 generations are wingless and very small and hard to see with the naked eye. So this image on the right, this is, I believe, the 2nd generation. The 3rd generation develops a white cotton, which you saw in that previous picture. It makes them more visible in hemlocks, and it persists in late fall and winter. So implications of hemlock. So have you seen this picture, all of these kind of gray individual snag trees or standing dead trees? This is from hemlock woolly adelgid infestation. So it caused a large mortality wave of hemlocks throughout this region. So most of the mortality in New Jersey was caused in the late 1990s when adelgid really got established. A lot of the hemlock stands have now been replaced by hardwood species. So throughout the current day in New Jersey, you can still find small stands of hemlock, sometimes small groups of them, and then even individuals. So most of the remaining trees, you'll see evidence of hemlock woolly adelgid, and some of their impacts or the symptoms or some of the damage they've caused to the trees will vary based on location. So that has to do with site characteristics and potentially different like regional genotypes of hemlock woolly adelgid. So now kind of moving into a biocontrol. So AI is kind of the hot thing right now. So I asked ChatGPT what is a biocontrol to see what it would come up with. And the answer was very good. So ChatGPT said, biocontrol is a method of controlling pests, diseases, and invasive species using natural enemies such as predators, parasites, and pathogens. It is an environmentally friendly alternative to chemical pesticides and can help maintain ecological balance. And then ChatGPT divides it into 3 biocontrols, different types of biocontrols. So the first is classical biocontrol, and this is when you introduce natural enemies from a pest's native habitat to control its population in its new habitat or environment. And you have augmentative biocontrols, and this is when you release large numbers of natural enemies to boost the population and suppress pests. The last one is conservation biological control, and this is enhancing conditions that support natural enemies, such as planting flowers to attract pollinators or reducing pesticide use to protect beneficial insects. So in the case of biological controls for hemlock woolly adelgid, you can kind of see them as these kind of like a 3-in-1 type of thing. So some of the history of HWA biocontrols in New Jersey. So I'm using HWA. That's kind of just an acronym for hemlock woolly adelgid. So they were first released in 1998. The 2 species that were initially released were warm season predators. So they prey upon that 2nd generation of hemlock woolly adelgid that you'll find in the summer. And the 2 species are, it's quite a mouthful, so bear with me, Sasagi skimnus tsugae and Simnus sinua nodulus. And then more recently, in 2005, about 20 years ago now, they started releasing a cold season predator for HWA, and this species is Laricobius nigrinus. And that's the species I'm going to kind of focus on today because that seems to be having the most impact. So on the right here, this is just a quick screen grab from the federal government's hemlock woolly adelgid predator database. So this tracks where hemlock woolly adelgid biocontrols have been released throughout the United States, as well as locations where they've gone back to historic release sites to try and recover the biocontrols to see how they've established. So kind of there's 2 layers on this map. This first more colorful layer is locations where biocontrols were released. So you can see the concentration is in northwestern New Jersey along the Delaware Water Gap, with some other places across the border into Pennsylvania. And then this kind of duller color is locations where they've gone back and checked to see if populations have reestablished. or not reestablished, but have established, and see how they're moving. So you can see they kind of have moved east a bit and then even south as well. So what's really interesting about hemlock woolly adelgid biocontrols is since HWA has been in New Jersey for so long, right? It's been here for coming up on 75 years or about 75 years now. There's a combination of warm and cold season predators, which is really important because it provides year-round control of hemlock woolly adelgid, allowing for these biocontrols to feed on the different stages of HWA, including eggs, nymphs, and the adults as well. We're also hoping to start releasing silverfly. So the genus for silverfly is Leucotoraxis. So this is a native predator to HWA out in the Pacific Northwest. It has been approved by USDA APHIS for release in our region. We just have to get approval specifically to release it in New Jersey. So that would probably be through New Jersey Department of Agriculture. We're hoping to maybe do that this year or next year. Similar to some of the other biocontrols, they feed on the larva of HWA, but this is another warm season biocontrol, whereas Laricobius nigrinus is kind of the main cold season biocontrol. So Laricobius nigrinus, or LN for short, this is an image of the adult on the right side. You can kind of see it feeding on that third generation of the cotton woolly adelgid insect. So it's active late fall into the winter. So Laricobius nigrinus is established pretty well in specific regions of New Jersey where they were previously released. Most of the releases done in New Jersey were conducted by the Federal Forest Service or the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. The main location, as you saw in that predator database where they've been released, is DUA, which is short for the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. Most recently, New Jersey Forest Service's Forest Health Program, so us, we worked with the federal government as well as some of our other state collaborators in this North Atlantic region to visit DUA in fall 2024. We went back to some of the historic release sites in the Water Gap area where Laricobius has been released. We recollected some of these insects kind of to see how they established throughout there. And then we redistributed them to another location in New Jersey, as well as some of the other states in our region. So like Rhode Island took some, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and a few of the other states in the Mid-Atlantic. I just want to make an important note. So you need permits to do these collections. So definitely don't do this yourself. So this is kind of the protocol for beat sheeting. It's not very scientific, but you hold what is essentially like a miniature sail. The sail is made out of like a canvas material that the adult Laricobius can easily grab onto. You hold the beat sheet, which is the sail, underneath limbs that look like they're relatively, I guess, like a high density infestation of hemlock woolly adelgid, and you gently tap those edges of the branches. The beat sheet will catch anything that falls off of them. You just want to make sure you're not really like whacking the tree too hard to cause any damage of the tree. And afterwards, you kind of scan any of the material or debris or insects that have fallen onto the beat sheet, looking for Laricobius nigrinus. And then to actually collect the Laricobius nigrinus off the beat sheet, use something called an insect aspirator. So that's this device on the left. There's a cork that goes on top of one of these collection vials. I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse, but out of the collection vial, there's these two metal stems. So the shorter stem is collected to this tube. The tube you put into your mouth, and then the longer stem is what you actually put next to the insect. And then you essentially use your own suction to suck the insect up into this vial that would be corked onto the bottom of this top device. There's filters in here, so the insect can enter the vial, but you can't inhale it to prevent you from inhaling any Laricobius nigrinus. So this is what it looks like. You're kind of balancing the beat sheet, putting this metal part of the cork stopper next to any of the Laricobius nigrinus, and then you suck them in. This is Deanna with, I believe she's a forester with Rhode Island who is helping do this this past fall. So this is an adult Laricobius nigrinus beetle that we collected, and here's a little video of it crawling around. Hopefully this loads. So you can kind of see the texture of the beat sheet and how they're kind of clinging onto it, which is pretty nice because you'll go through when there's a lot of debris on it. You'll collect all the Laricobius you see, and then you kind of gently brush off any of the dead foliage or needles from the hemlock. And as you do that, the Laricobius kind of cling onto it, and you can kind of get any of the ones that remain there. So this is what it looks like when you actually redistribute or re-release the biocontrols you collected. So it's this little wax paper cup. Inside of it are the Laricobius nigrinus. That's what the black dots are. I forgot to mention in those vials, when you're aspirating the insects, there's a material, it's called Excelsior. It's essentially what you would think of in your Easter basket when you were younger, except it's like a natural fiber material that hasn't been dyed. And it just kind of gives them something to cling on to so you're not smudging them to try and get them out. So you just use flagging to tie this onto, somewhere in a hemlock stand that has some hemlock woolly adelgid. So you can see there's some few white dots of hemlock woolly adelgid. This specific release took place in Wayanda State Park. So that's kind of I think it's Passaic County, close to Bergen County. So we'll put this out, leave it out for a few weeks or months, come back. Most of the Excelsior will probably have blown out onto the ground. And then you just collect the waste and dispose of the waste. And then you're kind of helping to establish a new population of Laricobius to control hemlock in that area. So pretty cool, exciting stuff. Um, so now I'm going to kind of move on to some of the state land projects we've had recently dealing with hemlock, specifically looking at the restoration of hemlock. So I'm going to talk about the Stoke State Forest Management Plan. I'm going to go through kind of just the objectives that we've done in the past and then how we're revisiting this site this year to hopefully make some changes to get some better success out of it. So these are the four main objectives of the management plan. So I believe some of the management plan is hosted somewhere on our website, but this is what is on the management plan. So the first objective is to conserve biological diversity, critical habitats, and diversity of native species across variable habitats. Maintain capacity of Stoke State Forest to perpetuate self-sustaining forested ecosystem for future generations. Improve age class and density distribution to increase resiliency and forest function. And the last objective is to conserve soil and water resources of the site to ensure sustained ecosystem services. So what's important to note is this management plan was for the entirety of Stoke State Forest, which has a lot of different forest types that are not specifically hemlock. So some of these objectives are specific to hemlock, where some of them might not be. So a little background on the site. So Stoke State Forest, it's located in Sussex County, pretty close to the Delaware Water Gap, within a short drive. It spans across 3 townships, Sandyston, Montague, and Frankford. The entire state property is just under 16,000 acres, and the area that we were looking to manage is just over 2,000 acres. The original timeline where a lot of this management was planned to take place or did take place was 2017 or 2018. And of this 2,262 acres, 150 of these acres were kind of put aside towards eastern hemlock restoration. And the reason why eastern hemlock restoration makes up such a small amount of this 2,200 acres is because of just how much damage hemlock has caused, or hemlock woolly adelgid has caused over the 60, 70 years it's been here. There's not a lot of these huge continuous hemlock stands that there used to be back in the 1950s up until the 90s when we saw that big mortality of hemlock. And kind of the purpose of this hemlock restoration was to regenerate eastern hemlock and restore eastern hemlock forest type back into the landscape. So this is the Stoke State Forest treatment type map here on the right. So this kind of lighter blue polygon is all of Stoke State Forest. You can see 206 kind of cuts right down the middle of it. And then each of the different colored polygons are different types of treatments that were implemented into Stokes. So specifically, the one we're looking at is EHR01. So that's Eastern Hemlock Restoration 01. And that parcel is right here. This is in kind of northeastern Stokes. This site is right next to the New Jersey School of Conservation. Some of you might know where that is. So this treatment specifically, I kind of broke it down. It's a little bit more detailed in the plan, but just to make it digestible. So it is silviculture. So there would be single tree selection or removal of competing trees. So a lot of the competing trees in this hemlock stand are oak. So you remove them either by mowing them if they're small enough. You can girdle the tree. So girdling the tree is essentially cutting a strip around the entire bark of the tree into the cambium. That prevents spread or transport of different nutrients from the roots up into the leaves and then vice versa. And eventually the tree will die, leaving a standing dead tree or a snag, which could potentially fall. Or we also did some cutting of trees as well. So the original basal area of this site was 149 square feet. Basal area is essentially volume of trees that take up space in the stand. And we're hoping to lower that to between 110 to 130 square feet. So a decent size reduction. The whole purpose of removing some of these competing species was giving hemlocks that are going to be planted or hemlocks coming up naturally a little bit more space to regenerate and kind of reduce competition amongst those competing species. So even though we wanted to lower this basal area, we didn't want to remove a third of the entire canopy. Hemlock kind of has this tricky balancing point where you want a little bit of light. It is a relatively shade tolerant species. You do want light for it to come back, but you also need to maintain a relatively high moisture so it doesn't dry the regenerating hemlocks. So what ended up happening is the canopy cover was reduced from 79% to 73%. So nothing too drastic. And then after this silviculture took place, we planted eastern hemlocks, which were propagated at the state nursery from state seed sources. The state nursery is down in Jackson. They do a great job helping us growing some seedlings for some of these projects. And then after this, a multi-acre deer fence was installed, which I'll get into that more. That ended up being relatively challenging. But so some of the results, before I get into that, this image on the right is kind of what the process of rearing these hemlock seedlings look like. So this is what it looks like in the greenhouse. So some of the success of this silviculture was providing more growing space for regenerating or newly planted hemlocks. If you go around this site today, you can still see some of the snags of the standing dead trees from girdling, which means the girdling did take place. You can see areas or specific trees where the girdling did not work, where you'll see a scar on the bark of the tree, but the tree was able to kind of come back from the girdling. So making sure we're girdling the trees appropriately moving forward is something to watch out for. And unfortunately, there's not as much natural hemlock propagation as we wanted. We see a lot of the planted seedlings do decently well, but in areas around the planted seedlings, we're not seeing a lot of these natural hemlocks coming in from the adult seed sources. And this is largely due to what we think is deer browse. And this is because some of the girdled trees, which during the silviculture, we tried to girdle trees on the outside of the fence so they wouldn't fall on the tree, but we still had to do some in the fence and near the fence. So some of the trees fell down onto the fence. And if that is not checked relatively quickly, herbivores can go in and out of the fence and feed on some of those hemlock seedlings. So what we want to see more of, this is an image on the left of kind of that area where we see some more of these natural regenerating hemlock seedlings. So we want to see more of that. And then we want them to move into this next cohort on the image on the right, where they're moving from seedlings to saplings, where they're a little bit more tolerant to deer browse and get to the point where deer browse aren't going to exclusively remove them from the landscape. So to obtain this, moving forward, we're going to gather some more data on optimal regeneration conditions for eastern hemlock at this EHR01 site. So this is that site kind of zoomed in with a little bit better image. And we're going to kind of do like definitely not a research project, but for our sake, help us to get a better understanding of kind of what parameters allow for better regeneration of these hemlock seedlings. So that can be done through creating several planting blocks. So hopefully 2 or more acres in size to test different prescriptions for improving hemlock regeneration. So this overlay is kind of what these blocks would look like. They're adjacent to each other. And within each one of these, we'll have a control where no management is done, as well as some type of prescription, which I'll talk about here. So the different prescriptions we're looking into is site preparation. So this is soil scarification. So this is disturbance of kind of the upper layers of soil that allows for any seed rain from hemlocks to come in and grow and regenerate naturally, or to kind of just increase nutrient availability to some of the hemlocks that we be planting in ourselves. In kind of cooperation with any type of large fencing we do, we'd also incorporate seedling tubes in some of these blocks. So if the fence were to come down, there's kind of a secondary defense against any type of herbivory, specifically deer is kind of what we're looking at. Along the same sentiment would be slash walls. So this is any areas where we remove some tree material, we can create small little walls around any of our plantings to kind of dissuade deer or herbivores from getting into them and chomping them. We're also going to look at hopefully lowering the BA a little bit more than the initial 110 to 130 square feet not across the entire site, just in certain areas of these blocks to see kind of how the hemlocks react. So as I said, include a partner control group for each of these prescriptions. And kind of reiterating, this isn't a research project. We're not hoping to publish anything from this. Ideally, if this were a research project, you'd have multiple replications of each control and each prescription. That's not what we're after. We're after just kind of investigating how to maximize the hemlock regeneration success specifically at this site. And with any type of kind of important, I guess, planting program, we definitely want to monitor it over time. So look at these prescriptions, kind of try to identify successes and failures with each of the prescriptions, and wherever we find these successes, apply them to either the other blocks or kind of more widespread throughout that entire EHR01 site. The last thing I want to highlight is a quick plug to kind of our outreach project that we've been doing called Pocket Presentations. So you can scan these, it'll open the New Jersey DEP YouTube page. These are kind of fun animated short videos, anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, that talk about these important forestry topics, especially how they relate to New Jersey, to kind of get a better sense of some of the projects we do, as well as some of the important background needed to perform a lot of these projects. So I'm going to, hopefully if it comes up, here's a quick trailer for the silviculture one.
Ever heard of the science of silviculture? Silviculture is the study of managing forests for different goals. Whether you want to grow healthy, resilient trees, create habitat for all sorts of wildlife, or promote forests that help combat climate change, you need to understand how forests grow, regenerate, and the risks they face. Silviculture is a complex science which takes years to study and understand, and we're very excited to help you start your journey with this video on the 3 main components of silviculture. Click the link in the description to watch our video now.
So they're just like a fun series of how to learn about different forestry topics. So feel free to check them out. Again, I'm Ben Pisano. My email is on the first slide. I'm hopefully going to send this slide over to Jean, and she can hopefully distribute it to you guys. I'll take questions after Dylan's. We're just going to jump right into Dylan's presentation now. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll stop sharing screen.
Thank you so much, Ben. And you did mention what I failed to mention in the beginning, that we're taking all the questions at the end. And so we have Dylan Wiget up next. We are so excited to hear how the Forest Service is managing wildfire. You can start to share your screen. So Dylan got his Bachelor's of Science with a concentration in forestry from Stockton University. And then he began working quickly afterwards with the Forest Service and with a consulting forester as well. He is with the Forest Service full-time, and he is going to share with us details about the Allen Road project and fighting wildfire before it begins. And so again, put your questions in the chat if you had any for Ben, and then if you end up with any by the end, we'll be able to have some time with both speakers to answer them.
Thanks, Jean, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. Hope everybody's doing well. This is a project that's near and dear to my heart, as it was the first project I worked on starting at the Forest Service, and I think it's really important. And I hope after this, I'll be able to give you an understanding of why. So this is Allen Road, and it's, just to give you an overview of this presentation, I'll go over the fire history, which is really important.
Note, I'm sorry, Dylan, you want to press hide on, there's this bar that you have on your screen. There we go. Cool. Okay, I'll say.
Yeah, so just going over this presentation, I'm going to be going over the fire history, which is extremely important when talking about anywhere in the Pinelands, especially for this project. And then I'll go over the silviculture activities that the Forest Service implemented here to mitigate the risk of wildfire in the future. And then I will share with you the progress we're making on that. So just going over the Pinelands in general, it's a naturally fire adapted forest ecosystem. There are many plants and animals that depend on fire to be successful in this area of New Jersey. Specifically mentioning the pitch pine, which is the most abundant tree in the area. It actually has something called serotinous cones, which means that it needs fire or extreme heat to reproduce. And recently, these fires have gotten out of hand in this area due to the suppression of the fire over the past half decade or even longer than that. And it's hard to burn responsibly in these areas now because of the suppression, that the forest has just come back so dense that it's really difficult to be safe, go in there and put fire on the ground responsibly without it getting out of hand. And I'll be mentioning ladder fuels a lot. That's trees and other vegetation, snow bent trees, really in the mid-story and the understory of the forest that allow fire to travel up into the canopy. And once fire gets into the canopy, it's catastrophic. And I want to talk about past major wildfires here, and I have a map here. So in the green, that's our boundary for the Allen Road project, with fire breaks going along Allen Road, which runs north to south, and also Oswego Road, which runs east to west. There you can see as they intersect. The two big fires here on the map are the 1977 fire, which claimed the lives of 4 firefighters from Eagleswood Township, volunteer firefighters. Also 1936 also claimed the lives of 5 firefighters. So this is an area that has been fatal in the past, and it's why us and Forest Fire have really prioritized this area and wanted to get something on the ground really over the past 20 years to make this a safer area to fight fire. And you can see on the map how big that 1999 fire was, over 11,000 acres. And most recently in 2023, actually right before this project was set to get on the ground, a fire burned to the west of Allen Road, kind of, illustrating the need. Hey, like we gotta get some fire mitigation practices on the ground here right now. And really the intent of the project was to first and foremost reduce that risk of wildfire, and fire is going to burn. It's the pine barrens. You can't stop it, but you can reduce the severity of it if you implement a smart and data-driven plan, which we think we've done here. And specifically in this area, there are a lot of local values at risk. There are in holdings, private property within that boundary I just showed you on the map. There's a campground to the south. The Warren Grove bombing range is to the north of the project area, and you have the Garden State Parkway to the east. So really, this is an area that, if a fire gets in here bad enough, it can do a serious amount of damage to not only natural lands but also local lands, private lands. And natural lands. Most notably, there's an Atlantic white cedar restoration site in the area of the project, and Atlantic white cedar is not very good in fire, especially because of the peat bogs it lies in. It's super susceptible to fire, and it took a lot of work to get the cedar restored in this area. So that's something we obviously want to protect. And also, in the vein of forest health, of protecting the forest, a forest that's as dense as the forest is by Allen Road it's not healthy. And I'll show pictures later on what I mean by that. But you have trees that are 40, 50 years old, and they're about the size of my forearm, which really, I'll tell you, is not very impressive. And in doing these thinnings of the forest, we can protect also from southern pine beetle, which is a huge deal in the pine barrens with all the pines. And of course, restoring the wildlife too is a goal of ours as well, particularly in this area, pine snake and timber rattlesnake, and getting their habitats to historic conditions where they can safely bask and den. I just want to make a quick just want to talk about fire breaks versus fuel breaks. So a fire break is it's a hard line, where firefighters can safely fight fires and hold fires, whereas a fuel break is a man-made change, and it really reduces the severity of a fire in a forest, makes it easier to control. A great example is this picture I have on this slide right here, and you can see the difference. On the left side here, that is an area that was not thinned, and the whole stand, this whole forest probably looked like that area on the left. You can see a snow-bent tree up in here, and another one here. Great ladder fuels to get fire into the canopy, which is really dangerous. And on the right side of your screen, this area has been thinned, and you can really see the difference in the understory about it really, this is what we're looking for when we're trying to mitigate fire. It reduces the speed at which a fire can travel through the forest, and it makes it way harder for it to get up into the canopy. So this picture here, this is the fire break itself, and this was number one priority for Forest Fire Service, and for us going into this, was to get this fuel break going before anything else, so that I'm sorry, this is a fire break, so that they can really put boots on the ground here to fight fire if anything were ever to break out, and to have a strong strategic point of which to fight fire from. And all it was just a clearing of the trees, 25 feet on either side of the road. And what it looked like before this was over top of the road, trees just touching. So, if fire gets into those crowns, it's really easy for it to hop this road and cause even more damage. So this was absolutely necessary here. And also, road maintenance was done on this project. Allen Road was an absolute wreck with potholes, and just accessibility. If there was a fire in this area, it was near impossible to get there in any kind of haste at all. Not to mention how dangerous it would have been to have been on this road while a fire was going. So pre-management conditions, and this picture really tells the story of the area. I would say most, if not all, of the forest looked like this picture. And you can see those really small diameter trees I was talking about, and just how if you lit a match in here, it's an absolute tinderbox. The fire would have no problem getting into the canopy, especially with the dry conditions of the summer, and even more recently with the droughts we've been having. This is an area that would burn extremely fast, because of this density. And so basically that picture here, it is on a graph. Right here we have in the blue, this is the pine oak forest type, and in the red is the pine forest type. And these are the two most dominant forest types we have in the Allen Road project, really in all of the pine barrens, I would say. And on that x-axis on the bottom, we have the diameter of the trees, and on the left side, it's trees per acre. So you can see in both forest types, we have trees at about 2 to 3 inches in diameter. So again, about the size of my forearm, and well over 1,500 trees per acre in the pine oak, and well over 2,000 trees per acre. So it's just tiny, abundant pitch pine mainly in this area. It's not healthy. It's super easy to start burning, and it creates those really dangerous ladder fuels that create catastrophic wildfire. Also, I want to talk about crowning index, which is just the wind speed it takes for wind to carry fire into the canopy. So the lower it is, the more dangerous it is. And in this area, that was around 20 miles per hour, which is extremely low to carry a fire into the canopy. So we really wanted to drive that number up while driving the trees per acre number down. So we did a lot of inventorying before we started this. It's over 1,300 acres. That's the footprint of all the silviculture activity we're doing, and on top of the road maintenance and the fire break. So in the light blue there, I'll talk about what low thinning is, and which is really the bulk of the project. Variable density thinning is in the purple there. A different type of thinning with the same end goal of reducing those ladder fuels and getting rid of the really small diameter trees. And then feathered variable density thinning just along the road, just feathering in off of that fire break to make it look more natural and more appeasing to the eye. So I'll talk about the low thinning, and this just is removing the small diameter trees to create more resource availability for the larger trees that are left after the thinning. And like I said, this is really small diameter trees, 2 inches, 3 inches, and we want to get rid of those, and we would leave them as slash on the ground. As they decompose, they return to the soil, adding nutrients. This is the brunt of the work here, over 1,000 acres. This is all being done by hand, by chainsaw, and it's going to be done in 2 treatments or 2 increments. As if we thinned it all at once, it would really shock the system, and we don't want to do that. We want to ease the forest into this new age for it, so it can be healthy and resilient. And this is the table here, and really this is a really busy table, but the first 3 columns there are the most important: trees per acre, basal area per acre, and the QMD. And basal area per acre is really just the amount of space the trees are taking up. And when you couple that with the QMD there, which is just the average diameter of the trees of 3.5, you have a lot of very small trees, and a lot of them, over 2,000 per acre. So we want to bring that basal area number down. It's not going to be 80 after the first treatment. It's probably going to be closer to 100, 110. But eventually we do, maybe 10 years down the line, we'll come back for a second thinning, and we'll get it down to that 80-foot basal area. And you see when we thin it, that QMD, it goes up. So we're getting rid of that. Just means we're getting rid of those small trees. We're leaving the bigger diameter trees in there, and hopefully they a lot of the times they take off in growth. Variable density thinning. So this is a little bit of a different method. It's only 264 acres, and it's really meant to create this mosaic of structural density. So really what we would like to do is just we have a certain number of basal area we'd like to get down to, and we have a lot of ways that we can do it. So we can go in there, we could punch holes in the forest, create these gaps. And again, this is what I was talking about with snake habitat, great basking areas for pine snake and timber rattler. We can also go in and do a little bit of the thinning like we're doing on the other portions, the low thinning areas of Allen Road. And we can do some feathering as well. And again, leaving all this slash behind, getting those nutrients into the soil, leaving dead standing trees, which is great habitat for birds, and leaving those large living trees, and just really not making anything look uniform, having that variability in the forest to really simulate disturbance in there. And again, here's the table for that. And you see we take down the basal area again, way lower, down to 50, but it can look from 50-foot basal area to 100-foot basal area, depending on where you're standing. But overall, we bring it down to that 50 mark, and we bring down those trees per acres considerably, as well as bringing that QMD up. So we're leaving those big trees behind. So progress on this, the fire break is done. This is Oswego Road with the fire break completed on the right side. So like I said, great area now for fire. If fire does occur here, like it has in the past, they can get their guys in there and they have a place to hold the fire. That fire break is done. The variable density is also completed. It was finished in the past year. and it looks great. It's really has those punched holes in there, really created great habitat for snakes and birds, and it's really reduced the risk of fire. And low thinning is about 50% done. Again, that's being done by hand, and that's most of the work that we need to finish. And that will be done again. Like I said, there will be another treatment done after the first treatment, maybe 10 years down the line.
So I don't mean to
And
interrupt, Dylan, but are
Mhm.
we at the point in your slides to launch the poll?
yes,
Okay, I'm gonna, while Dylan is speaking, please, if you can, answer the poll questions that we mentioned there would be a poll, and the first question is to consent to the poll, but it is anonymous. And don't forget to press submit at the end of the poll. So take it away, Dylan. Sorry for the interruption.
cool. No, you're good. Thanks, Gene. So really what we want to do here, we want to be able to implement Allen Road in strategic areas that have experienced that catastrophic wildfire in the past in the Pine Barrens. And identifying these areas is critical for Forest Fire Service in stopping them before they cause damage to public and private lands and natural lands. And there's a lot of talk, especially with the attention that's come on to wildfire, especially since those fires out west by Los Angeles, about what could have been done to stop this. And forest management is really a great preemptive strategy to protect these areas. And if we can get it in there in these areas and um, thin them and reduce risk and reduce those ladder fuels, we can really reduce the damage that this fire does to the Pine Barrens and to really lots of critical areas for this state. And that's really important to us, really important to myself and the Forest Service. Yep, and that's all I had. If you have any more questions, be happy to answer them.
Sure, we
Thank
do
you.
have just a couple questions. Thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Ben. Just a note to all of our participants to please scroll through. There are 10 questions in the poll, so remember to go through to get to all of them if you are consenting to take the poll. And then so let me get to the questions. So our first comment was that I went on a fundraising hike for Crosville Mill and passed a hemlock stand that's been successfully treated. So that's a nice comment about the hemlocks. And then regarding Dylan's subject, the question came in. How much of that tinderboxed forest floor is invasive species?
In the Pine Barrens, actually not much of it. So a lot of the understory in there is probably huckleberry and blueberry and scrub oak. And scrub oak is a great one of those ladder fuels that can take fire up into the canopy. But it's also important as a native species to incorporate it into our plants and yeah, keep it in its native range and keep it healthy as well.
And the scrub oak you're talking about is that what is it, Quercus ilicifolia?
Yeah, Quercus
Yeah,
ilicifolia,
also known as
uh,
bear oak.
bare oak, also blackjack oak is another
Mhm.
big one that's in there too.
Cool. So the person that asked that question wrote, irony to me as not a scientist that forests overflowing with deer are the opposite. All small trees eaten and destroyed, so only big ones remain, so no replacement. But that's just a comment. And then, so our next question is, who does the clearing and is it state funded with taxes?
So the clearing that was done by Forest Fire Service, and I believe that is done with grant money that fire has, and that was done a lot by hand. as well. But from fire on Oswego Road and on Allen Road, we had a contractor do that work.
Wonderful. Well, we don't have too many more questions, folks. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to stick them in chat. I have a question for Ben. Because I don't know if you all know, but I'm in love with hemlocks. And does one thing that we did talk about, and I don't know if Ben you can speak to for the folks that are still on, there's that stand that you called the bulletproof stand that's high in terpenes. Do you have any more to
Yeah,
elaborate about that?
So it's a pretty interesting location. It is partially on state land and partially on federal land. The federal land is part of the Water Gap. It's up in Sussex County. So it's kind of been nicknamed the Bulletproof Stand. And they've noticed that hemlock woolly adelgid in that area is like causes noticeably less destruction or damage on the trees. So there's been a lot of scientists, both federally and academically aligned, coming in and testing and doing a lot of different studies. Like I think I've seen pollination studies there as well. But what I believe is the consensus is the terpene concentration amongst those trees is higher than what you'd find in other hemlock stands. And that kind of I don't know if it's like an immune response or it just makes the trees a little bit hardier to hemlock woolly adelgid. But those trees tend to be faring a lot better. Like not quite what it looked like pre-hemlock woolly adelgid, but definitely better than the normal range looks like right now. So it's very interesting. And when you go there, you still see hemlock woolly adelgid on the trees. Like there's signs of them. They're they have some of the symptoms, but just not to the degree that you see throughout the rest of the range of hemlock and hemlock woolly adelgid in New Jersey. So very interesting. I believe the state has done projects where we've tried to collect seed from them and propagate them. But even though they do well against hemlock woolly adelgid, I think nursing them in the greenhouse is more difficult than like the typical hemlock species. And then I think planting them is another story where like it seems like they're probably doing well at that site, largely because of the site characteristics of the location they're in. So it seems like they
Maybe
don't really
it's
want to move.
maybe it's the mycorrhizae, the ancient mycorrhizae there, because I think they have there's a lot we don't know about that.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, so if anyone in the audience is interested in it, if you look up Bulletproof Stand New Jersey or Bulletproof Stand Sussex County, New Jersey, I think there's definitely articles about them, and there might even be peer-reviewed articles on certain journal websites. So
Um, thank you so much. And so we have a few more questions that came in. So we're gonna go back and forth between both of you fellas. So back to Dylan about the grant funding question. So there's a follow-up. Was it federal money or state money that was the grant funding?
I believe it was federal grants.
yeah,
Okay,
most of
You
the
might
grant
know
money that the Forest Service gets, especially Forest Health, and then a good portion of state lands, normally it's federal grant money.
Mhm.
So
okay. Well, let's hope that keeps coming in because
yes,
we
yeah,
need to save our trees, keep
yeah.
our forests safe. And okay. So question about hemlocks. How will the newly planted hemlock saplings be protected from getting HWA? Is it thought that they might survive because of the biocontrol?
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't mention is so that Delaware Water Gap collection of biocontrols, it's so when we collected them in November of 2024, so just a few months back, that was actually the first iteration of that. It's kind of like what people call like natural insectaries. So there's one in Rocky Gap, Maryland that has produced like many like thousands of biological controls, Laricobius nigrinus specifically, that are collected from there and redistributed to other states. So the one we did in Delaware Water Gap, that was the first iteration of this. So it was kind of just a trial run to see what it would look like, and it was massively more successful than we thought. I think we collected over 3,000 beetles across like 5 days of collections, which is very impressive. So I think the hope is when we collect them in hopefully fall of 2025, depending on how far along the second iteration of this management plan is at EHR01 in Stokes, hopefully we can release some of them in that site to kind of bolster the response of those newly planted hemlocks to hemlock woolly adelgid. And I believe some of the larger adult trees at that EHR 101 site have been treated. And the main treatments right now are neonicotinoids, which I know there's been kind of like a ban on them, but midacloprid and dinotefuran. So they were treated back in probably like 2015, 2016, 2017, either prior to that project or as a result of that project. So we would definitely kind of go through and look at those trees and see if any of those adult trees need to be retreated. So yeah,
Great, thank
that's
you. So another question about the hemlocks. What is the range of hemlock trees and how are they good for wildlife as opposed to other native species of trees that might replace them if they die out? This is a big answer.
I'll
but-
give a quick answer, and then Gene, if you want to, because I think you are definitely more of kind of a whole picture ecology person than I am. But I'm gonna
Okay,
see if I can reshare this screen. I think
Sure.
oh no, I turned this layer off, so I can't actually access it. But yeah, so the native range of hemlock in New Jersey is pretty much from the north all the way to the end of the intercoastal plain, partially into the intercoastal plain. So it covers like pretty much the north 60% of New Jersey. And then that range goes, into other states as well. It goes down into Maryland and even south beyond that. A lot of areas where you'll see a lot of hemlock, depending on how prolific hemlock woolly adelgid is, are kind of along these stream and river corridors. But so hemlock woolly adelgid, it's even like as you go west, it hasn't been fully it hasn't fully infested a lot of other states. So there's still there's still regions in Pennsylvania, I think in Western Pennsylvania, where there's no hemlock woolly adelgid. So it's kind of interesting. They do a lot of treatments in Western PA and as well as into Ohio. But in terms of, Gene, do you want to answer the other half of that question?
well, I don't want to spend too much time and I have a tendency for long answers, but yeah, the range is really, the mountains from the Appalachians all the way up to Maine and then the northern half of New Jersey. So we don't really see them in like the coastal plain region. And so regarding the wildlife, there's a lot to research regarding wildlife, but every species is very important and hemlock provides a lot of shelter and forage, especially for animals in winter when a lot of other trees do not provide don't have leaves, right? They have needles, but they can be eaten. And so back when I was in forestry up in Vermont, where there are a lot of hemlocks as well, we were taught that it is very important for survival in the wintertime. So
Yeah, they kind of provide like a very unique habitat too, where you find them. There's like in the middle of the summer, if you're in like, a healthy hemlock stand, it's like a lot darker and dimmer. It's a lot cooler in the stand as well. So a lot of the native insects, flora and fauna that kind of require that. It's very important for those.
yeah, and I do believe there are many. I haven't studied hemlocks intensely, so this person can come back to me and ask me further because now I'm probably going to look it up on my phone and get obsessed with it for a few hours and figure out all the different insect interactions between hemlock. But I can assure you it's a native that is very important. So even though we have, Doug Tallamy that touts our oaks, our black cherry and black willow, every species of our native forest type is really essential for preserving biodiversity. And I hope that answered your question, but we have to move on. We have a few more. Are controlled burns in the pinelands done annually? This is for you, Dylan, I guess, or Ben can chime in too.
Yes. So Forest Fire Service they have burn rotations. So they'll have certain blocks of areas that they'll burn every 5 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever their rotations are on.
Great. We're getting a teeny bit of feedback from you, Dylan. I don't know what that is. So here we go. Are there volunteer opportunities to help assist in programs like this, or are they primarily scientific?
So there are some opportunities, I think, not as much in the I think for Dylan's half of the project, that's like, very specialized and you need a lot of qualifications when you're kind of doing that type of work. But in terms of forest health, there are some opportunities. So if you want to reach out to, let me see if I can post it in the chat. Our Ask a Forester email, we can hopefully get you a response depending on what you're looking for.
And then another thing you could do is, you could also call your county office and we can put you in touch with local opportunities in forests. But, I would go first to this Ask a Forester at NJDEP.
I'll also say too, if we have any types of like planting opportunities on state lands, that's a good way to get involved. I know personally that was my first interaction with the Forest Service, was I volunteered and was able to come out and plant some trees.
Arbor Day is coming up soon, I think, right?
Yep, but let's, just like Earth Day is every day, Arbor Day is every day. So
There
let's
you
plant,
go.
let's take care of trees every day, but don't plant trees in the summer because that's goofy. So I think we're all set. We don't have any more questions. I'd like to thank so much Ben Pisano and Dylan Wiget for sharing your success stories with us for the Earth Day Everyday series. It was fascinating, and please, all participants and anyone watching this on YouTube, feel free to reach out to the NJDEP if you'd like to volunteer. The email is askaforester@dep.nj.gov. And we hope that you join us for our next installments of the Earth Day Everyday series. And our next one will be on the 21st of April. And forgive me, I don't have the flyer up for the subject, but we will have, this is the first out of 6 webinars we have in a row. So join us again next week and the following weeks. Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Take care.